battles. I can recall many epic Nerf battles, paintball games, laser tag dominations, marshmallow fights, and Beanie Baby battles. Yes, marshmallows and Beanie Babies make for very interesting moments. I could tell you stories of battles with my family, the most recent one including the Beanie Babies, with my 2-year-old nephew absolutely pummeling us. I could tell you stories of a friend and I blacking out an entire house to prepare a really epic Nerf battlefield for a friend's surprise birthday party. And then there are the stories I could tell about the Huron youth. And I know what happens on Wednesday nights should stay on Wednesday nights, but I feel like just for fun, because I have the microphone, I should share this story. So a few months ago, we ventured out to Laser Quest together, and as with all battles, relationships are left at the door. They can be picked up at the end. As an Enneagram 3, I take that very seriously. It's no nonsense, all business, no play. So we get geared up, laugh at the nicknames we choose, comment on how our clothes light up, and get our game faces on, and game 1 begins. We zoom around the field taking shots. Some people prefer to find one spot with a good vantage point and just peg at people. Other people decide that the no running rule is simply just a guideline, not an actual strict rule. I won't say which one I was. But the game finishes, we all come back out, we laugh, we're sweating, we're talking about our strategy, who we got, and having fun. Game 2, it's about to begin. We all pick different nicknames. I gather a few of the youth around to figure out what should my nickname be. And we settle on Rey, because I've been told that I resemble Daisy Ridley, who plays Rey in Star Wars. Sounds great to me. But this time, this game had different rules. There would be 2 different teams playing against each other, but on each team there was going to be a designated traitor that nobody knew who it was, and that traitor had to earn the trust of their team, but then shoot at them. Unbeknownst to everyone, I was picked to be the traitor on my team, so I immediately hone into my inner Rey, absolutely ready to destroy everybody. Now remember, I had already mentally and emotionally left my relationships at the door, so I had zero compassion for anyone on my team. It was game on. So I quickly do earn the trust of my team, and we run around and we start, let me backtrack. We don't run around, we walk around the field trying to destroy the other team, but then whoops, I accidentally hit my own team member. Sorry, clearly didn't see you there. Keep going, whoops, hit you again. Sorry, it must be really dark and my eyesight's not working very well. Whoops, hit you again. Wow, bad aim, everybody. We should restart. Some time went by and I had them convinced that I wasn't the traitor. And then eventually I was like, I'm just going to let them know. And I go full on against them. And by the end of the game, tell me who won. The traitor. Now, maybe I shouldn't have shared that story because, one, some of you haven't seen this side of me yet, so I'm sorry you're finding out now. And also, sorry to the parents of our students who were there who may not have realized who their students are hanging out with. My bad. But 2, we don't really want the traitors to win. That's not the goal. We want the good people to win. But, in this case, we'll make the exception and the traitor is fine. So I tell that story just for fun, but we are in week 2 of a series called Surrounded: How I Fight My Battles. And we're going to look at an epic battle in the book of Exodus. And it does not involve Star Wars or the traitors winning. Spoiler alert. And while we go through the story to prepare you with what to expect in the coming moments, I want to tell you that we are going to travel through the different time orientations: the past, the present, and the future. If you were with us with the Enneagram series in the winter, let me expand on that knowledge just a tiny bit more. Each person has a higher preference for one of the time orientations, so you may find yourself leaning more towards the past, the present, or the future more than another. And that in turn then means you could see that other people in other time preferences, you maybe critique them a little bit more because it's different. For example, someone who is very future-oriented may struggle to have a conversation with someone who's very past-oriented. But the fact is, all 3 orientations have downfalls, and all 3 orientations have values, and all 3 perspectives are needed, and all 3 perspectives are not needed in other ways. And though we won't unpack personality today, as we explore the Battle of Exodus, know that we are going to unpack these orientations and what the values and downfalls could be. And though this is a battle of the past, it doesn't mean that we don't face battles today. And noticing how you might respond based on this story can bring awareness to yourself in your own battles today. So here we go. Exodus is the second book of the Bible, and we are jumping into chapter 14. For context, we have the Israelite people, and they have been in slavery for years under the strict hand of the Egyptians. God prepared and used a man named Moses to free all of them from slavery and take them to the promised land in Canaan. Their years in slavery would have been hard. It would have been hard physically, would have been hard mentally, would have been hard emotionally, would have been hard spiritually. It's a type of hard that I don't think someone who hasn't been enslaved in that way could even try to understand. So Moses and his brother Aaron go to Pharaoh and ask him to let God's people go. And he said no on multiple occasions, and after each time he said no, God sent a plague. But you know, the local magicians tried to outperform God, but really, was there any point? It was only when a plague took all the firstborn sons did Pharaoh agree to let the people go. So then Moses begins to lead them to the promised land. They are free. Oh, the sweet taste of freedom. I do wonder what that experience would have been like, to go from being in slavery one day to freedom the next. If we're talking orientation, I feel like they'd have no sense of which way was even up or down. It would be a mix of elation with deep pain, with curiosity and uncertainty for the future, mixed with praising God for freeing them. How one would process all of that at once is such a mystery to me. They probably wanted to laugh, cry, run, and sleep all at the same time, and I'm not sure if you've tried that combo of things, but I think it's impossible. Quite honestly, I'm not sure if you've thought about the day that we will be quote-unquote freed from isolation. And though I'm not sure I can really compare our situation now to years of slavery that the Israelites went through, it is a situation that we can use to try to understand what they may have been feeling and experiencing. So for us, let's use our dreams of being back together one day in person as our baseline. I'm predicting that many of us could be a bit of a mess on that day. It's like a pressure cooker finally being released, because sometimes you're in the middle of a situation and you just have to keep going and going, but you don't really realize what's being pent up inside until it's finally released. And I'm sure the Israelites felt that, but on a much more extreme level than what we'll experience on our first Sunday back together. But the more we can understand people's stories, the more we can empathize. And sometimes the Bible feels distant since it's so old, but that doesn't mean there isn't a relatability factor. We can use this pandemic to understand their situation, but we can also use their story to understand ours. As Shane said last week, God's record can get at our reality. So let's read. If you have your Bible, you can open it up to Exodus 14, and we are going to read verses 5 to 9 right now. When word reached the king of Egypt that the Israelites had fled, Pharaoh and his officials changed their minds. "What have we done, letting all those Israelite slaves get away?" they asked. So Pharaoh harnessed his chariot and called up his troops. He took with him 600 of Egypt's best chariots, along with the rest of the chariots of Egypt, each with its commander. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, so he chased after the people of Israel, who had left with fists raised in defiance. The Egyptians chased after them with all the forces of Pharaoh's army, all his horses and chariots, with his charioteers and his troops. The Egyptians caught up with the people of Israel as they were camped beside the shore. Let the battle begin. Cue the Hans Zimmer music. But at this point, we have to realize that the Israelites don't know what's coming. All they know is that they're free, and they're trying to process what that even means. But an ambush is coming, and only aware of that right now. So not only did the Israelites have to go on this season of adjusting to their newfound freedom, Pharaoh had to adjust to not having an entire nation of people be his slaves 24/7. Let's just say he wasn't handling it well. It could have been, for him, a mix of trying to restore his ego after he gave in to defeat, mixed with everybody around him putting pressure on him as he was the leader of the people. The economy likely would have been in shambles because he let them go. Many would have been grieved with him because their firstborn sons were dead. So to lead his people now would have been a battle in and of itself. In an act of pain, impulsivity, rage, fear of loss of control, Pharaoh puts up his fists and declares war. He picks the most beastly warriors, the best chariots, the fastest horses, and the sharpest and deadliest weapons. No one dare go against him now. Basically, there is zero hope for the Israelites. Or is there? So remember, at this point, the Israelites don't know what's coming. But when they find out, here's how they respond. Verses 10 to 12. As Pharaoh approached, the people of Israel looked up and panicked when they saw the Egyptians overtaking them. They cried out to the Lord, and they said to Moses, "Why did you bring us here to die in the wilderness? Weren't there enough graves for us in Egypt? What have you done to us? Why did you make us leave Egypt? Didn't we tell you this would happen while we were still in Egypt? We said, 'Leave us alone. Let us be slaves to the Egyptians. It's better to be a slave in Egypt than a corpse in the wilderness.'" So did you catch our first time orientation? The past. All right. So they find out that Pharaoh is coming, and quite honestly, an intense feeling of fear is an expected response, because the man who had been holding them captive for years was coming back for them. In the brain, there's this part called the amygdala, and it is the part that triggers the fight, flight, or freeze response. And this isn't a response we have control over. It's the body's natural automatic reaction when we are in a fear-filled situation, which is a good thing in most cases. For example, if we're being chased by a bear, we need our instincts to kick in and take us to safety. God was very smart when he gave us amygdalas. But here's what's interesting about the Israelites. Yes, I don't fault them for fear. I couldn't, nor do I fault anybody today for feeling fear in a pandemic. But their response is to flee to the past, to go back to a normal that though they hated, but at least they knew and could predict behaviors. Now, Pharaoh was in a rage and everything was unpredictable and lacking hope. And even though they knew that Moses was bringing them to the promised land, it all of a sudden didn't even seem worth it to them. Let's go back, they said. Let's go back to what we once knew. And who do they blame for their new normal? God. And that could be a sermon in and of itself, but let's roll with them and look to the past. In the past, yes, there was slavery. In the past, yes, they had pain, hard days, demanding tasks, and no autonomy. But also in the past was a God fighting their battle. In the past, there was a God who prepared a self-conscious, I-can't-do-it man named Moses to approach another man with great power and arrogance named Pharaoh. In the past, there was a God who outperformed all the magicians, proving his power to be the greatest of all. In the past was a God who went to no end to break the cycle of slavery and restore the lives of his chosen people. So yes, the amygdala can take over and we can feel intense fear. But if we were to run to the past, which part would we run to? In this pandemic, the most obvious battle we're all in the middle of right now, where do you run? Do you run to the place where you wish you were in that previous part of life that felt safer than our current battle? Or do you run to the God who fights the battles when it feels like everything is closing in? The past is not a bad place to go, though sometimes we hear that it is. And it can be. Holding to the good old days or craving a previous season of life can hinder us from moving forward in life and from moving forward in growth. But here's when we need to go to the past. We need to go to the past to remember God's faithfulness. Otherwise, we are so quick to forget. When you see it, know that those are the moments of the past that we need to look back upon. Those are the moments where we're reminded of who is fighting our battles. The one who prepared Moses' heart for a battle against a powerhouse of a man. The one who destroyed the magicians in a duel when he performed and sent the 10 plagues. And the one who single-handedly freed an entire nation from slavery. That's worth looking to the past for. Let's be real. This lesson is something that we're going to have to learn over and over and over again. We're not going to get it right all the time. We are slow to learn, our amygdala can take over, and uncertainty can take the steering wheel. But God's used to this. He's not afraid of it. he continued to pursue and save the Israelites even though they forgot his power of freeing them just as quickly as a child forgets to clean their room after a parent asks them for the 20th time. This isn't God's first rodeo. He knows how to handle us when we decide to run to the past, wanting things to be as they were. He can handle our humanness. But we can learn to train our minds and our hearts to get better at looking to the past for reminders of God's faithfulness. And then holding to those moments when the present situations are difficult and the waves are coming at us with great strength. That is the value of the past. All right, so let's keep moving on in our story. And not only that, let's switch orientations from the past to the present. Exodus 14, verse 13 to 14 says, "But Moses told the people, 'Don't be afraid, just stand still and watch the Lord rescue you today. The Egyptians you see today will never be seen again. The Lord himself will fight for you. Just stay calm.'" So the Israelite people are running around in a panic, and I picture Moses as this parent who gets down at their eye level, holds them by the shoulders, looks them square in the eyes, and he says, "Don't be afraid." He says, stop the panic. Stop letting your emotions control you. Stop looking to the past, to a previous stage. Remember who freed you. Remember whose power is greater. Moses is saying, in this present moment, everybody, let the knowledge of God keep you steady. Don't let your emotions dictate your decisions. Keep your eyes focused and your movements continuous. We can do this. Yes, there's a roaring army coming straight for us. That is a real thing. But God is also real, and you know this. Sometimes it's hard for our hearts to remember what our heads already know. The communication between the two isn't always clear. And I can recall some moments in my life where the emotion of the situation took the driver's seat. And oftentimes I'm quite aware when that happens, but I can't get myself out of it. And that's where the people closest to me are able to take me by the shoulders and look me in the eyes and say, "Stop it." Do you have those people in your life? God can use the people in our lives to remind us to return to the present reality, to get out of our headspin and remember what we probably already know. It's hard to move in the present or move forward in the present moment when we're in a tailspin, but as soon as we can get a grasp on truth again, are we then able to continue on? Verse 19 to 22. Then the angel of God, who had been leading the people of Israel, moved to the rear of the camp. The pillar of cloud also moved from the front and stood behind them. The cloud settled between the Egyptian and Israelite camps. As darkness fell, the cloud turned to fire, lighting up the night. But the Egyptians and Israelites did not approach each other all night. Then Moses raised his hand over the sea, and the Lord opened up a path through the water with a strong east wind. The wind blew all that night, turning the seabed into dry land. So the people of Israel walked through the middle of the sea on dry ground with walls of water on each side. So use your imagination with me. So the Israelites, who had peacefully set up camp by the sea, were disturbed to hear of the Egyptians coming for them. So they fall to their knees in prayer of desperation, where they get both angry with God and pray for miraculous rescue. And God just takes it. But then, oh wait, just kidding. Moses said, "Get off your knees, stop praying, and let's go." So they pack up camp as quickly as possible, gather together, and start going. Go where, you ask? The middle of the Red Sea. Moses is standing there with his hand raised like a schoolboy, and the waters simply obey and separate. Think about it. This would have been the most bizarre thing you'd ever see. And I'm sure in that moment of fear of the Egyptians raging at them, they probably didn't even think twice. Let's just run on the floor of the sea like normal people do on a normal Thursday, everybody. And oh look, casual clouds moving with us too. This is fine and normal. This is how we fight our battles. Let's just say the Israelites could take zero credit for the win. They did nothing. They complained, they hesitated, they did blindly obey, so I'll give them that. But there was God in the middle of it all, being faithful to them despite their unstable state. He took the lead. He made the win happen. He kept them safe and out of harm's way the whole time. He gets 100% of the credit. How God works to fight our battles is so not normal or straightforward. First off, he parted water. creating a way, making it possible for the Israelites to get out of the corner that they were trapped in. And when they felt like they had nowhere to run and no safe place to go, God did the unthinkable, the unimaginable, and the miraculous. And he made a way when there was no way. Secondly, he resided in the cloud. Not sure if you know, clouds are in the sky, not on the ground. But take note that this cloud went from being in front of them to behind them. He started guiding them in a cloud from the front, but when they crossed over the sea, he moved to the back. God works from all sides. He's not limited to one place at one particular time. He can move from the front to the back, to the side, to the side, to the top, to the bottom. Wherever he needs to be, he will be. And in that moment, he needs to be behind. Because in the back, it meant he was also in front of the Egyptian army. The cloud was both a shield of protection for the Israelites and a sword for battle against the Egyptians. So let's think of the battles we face, both the internal battles and the external battles. When we get to a place where we think there is absolutely, positively no route of escape, or when we get to a place where we think there is absolutely, positively no chance of getting to the other side unscathed, we have some options as to what to do. One, we could do nothing. We could just accept the circumstances as they are. Or we could go down fighting, the amygdala taking the lead, kicking and screaming the whole way, attempting to take control of the situation, prove our worth, and single-handedly try to take down the enemy, keyword being try. Or you could run to the one who fights the battles in a way that is unthinkable, unimaginable, and miraculous. If you're like me, you like the I'm going to take him down my own way type of style. It feels more rewarding and satisfying, and it's probably more sweat-inducing from all the action. But here's the thing, though. The last option, when we run to God who fights battles, it may seem like a passive option, but it's actually not. The Israelites had an active role to play in the battle as well. Verses 15 to 16 says, "Then the Lord said to Moses, 'Why are you crying out to me? Tell the people to get moving. Pick up your staff and raise your hand over the sea. Divide the water so the Israelites can walk through the middle of the sea on dry ground.' God told them, get off your knees and go. God would take care of the water and the army. Small things, small things. But they had to move their feet and get themselves across the water. God wasn't going to just fly them over on a magic carpet, though I wouldn't put it past him. When we are in a battle, trusting in the one who makes a way and knows what position he needs to be in can still require our involvement. And that involvement could be a number of different things. It could be a physical movement. It could be a movement of moving away from something, for example, a toxic relationship. Or it could be physically moving toward something, like a ministry that you know you have a gift and a passion for, but you just haven't quite taken the step yet. It could also be a mental movement. It could be a mental movement of taking your thoughts captive to understand your patterns of thinking to figure out what may need adjustment. Or a mental movement of openly and vulnerably sitting down with a close friend to admit a way of thinking that you know is wrong, but you need help to break the cycle. It could be an emotional movement, emotional movement of finally learning to love who God created you to be, to stop comparing yourself to everybody else. Or an emotional movement of forgiving someone who has harmed you so you no longer have to hold on to the emotional weight of holding a grudge. It could also be a spiritual movement of dealing with the anger that you've had against God from a painful situation that happened in the past. Or it could be a spiritual movement of turning to a spiritual discipline to grow in your understanding of God rather than letting your faith journey become stale. We all have a role to play in the battles that we face. And what that looks like is something only you can determine. But ultimately, though we do have a role, how the battle plays out in the end, we still won't be able to take credit for it. Only God can. God is the one who can give us the strength and the courage that we need to make those movements, and then he does the rest. He parts the water and moves where he needs to move. As verse 18 says, "When my glory is displayed through them, all Egypt will see my glory and know that I am the Lord." All right, let's keep reading. Exodus 14, verses 28 to 31. "Then the waters returned and covered all the chariots and charioteers. The entire army of Pharaoh, all of the Egyptians who had chased the Israelites into the sea, not a single one survived. But the people of Israel had walked through the middle of the sea on dry ground, as the water stood up like a wall on both sides. That is how the Lord rescued Israel from the hand of the Egyptians that day. And the Israelites saw the bodies of the Egyptians washed up on the seashore. When the people of Israel saw the mighty power that the Lord had unleashed against the Egyptians, they were filled with awe before him. They put their faith in the Lord and in his servant Moses. So the entire Egyptian army is dead. They are gone. And the entire group of Israelites are on the other side of the water, still free. They never lost their freedom. And now the battle of the present becomes a battle of the past, which then becomes a reminder of God's faithfulness and a mark in time to hold on to for the next battle. So let's close off our time together briefly looking to the future, our last time orientation. So when the Israelites began their journey toward the promised land after being freed, let's recall that they probably had some mix of emotions that they were trying to process. Let's recall that they had witnessed God perform the 10 plagues and his power. Let's recall that after they had set up camp and heard of the raging army coming for them, in an effort to survive, they started to blame God. Let's recall that they forgot his faithfulness that fast. It's a good thing that God's faithfulness is not dependent on human faithfulness. And despite their inconsistent behaviors, God made a way when there was no way, and he'll never let the freedom that he gave them slip away. So now they're on the other side. Their defensive posture had a chance to finally cool off. The adrenaline could stop pumping so fiercely, and they had a chance to think about what just happened. God had won the battle for them. They didn't have to lift a finger, just their toes. Wouldn't that give them confidence going forward? Wouldn't that deepen their trust in God, the protector and the fighter for their freedom? Sure, we can look to later moments in the Bible and realize that they continually made mistakes and turned from God, but so will we. We're forgetful people. But when we have these moments that happen where we recognize God as the battle warrior, we can take those with us going forward. And remember, it may not look the way you may think it should look. It'll probably be unthinkable, unimaginable, and miraculous. And when we're ready and watching for the unthinkable, the unimaginable, and the miraculous, and then notice it, our faith can't help but be strengthened. Our hope can't help but be strengthened. And our trust in him can't help but be strengthened. And aren't those great weapons to have? Faith, hope, and trust. Our ammunition supply can be replenished with something that nobody can take away. We can be so prepared for the next battle, ready with our faith, hope, and trust in the one who will do the impossible task of creating a way when there is no way and being both a protective shield and a sword against the enemy. We don't need swords and shields or bows and arrows when there is faith, hope, and trust in our quiver. So as we each go and face our own battles, may we hold to the past moments of God's faithfulness instead of looking to the past with longing. May we discover our active response in the present moment rather than letting our emotions dictate where we should go. And instead of looking to the future with fear and hesitation, may we move forward with strengthened faith, hope, and trust in the one who fights our battles for us. To close, A.W. Tozer said, "How completely satisfying to turn from our limitations to a God who has none."